Good morning. After many years of attending events like IoT Solutions World, one of the things that we always felt would be most interesting would be the opportunity to not just come and talk about what we're doing as companies, myself as an analyst, and my panelists as manufacturers and software providers, but to also take the time to do some research to better understand the markets and what the markets are doing. And that's exactly what we did today. So we're excited to have the chance today to talk about some research that my firm has done over the past few months leading up to IoT Solutions World. The question for us was, there's a lot of debate about IT and OT and how they're working together and how they're coordinating to deliver IoT solutions. Some people think IT is leading the charge. Others think operations is leading the charge. But again, who knows? Let's talk about what the survey says. And before we sit down and talk with my esteemed panelists, I want to thank SAS and HPE for being the partners and sponsors of this particular session. And to quickly introduce myself, I am the principal analyst of Futurum Research. I'm a 6-time best-selling author and also a contributor on Forbes, and I do regularly speak around the world to rooms sometimes a little bit larger and sometimes a little smaller, but it is great to have the chance to speak with all of you today. So allow me to introduce the research that we will be talking about today. Over the last 45 to 60 days ahead of this event, we had the opportunity to speak with over 500 respondents from around the world, and we focused on talking to executives in charge of IT and operational technology within their organizations. Our goal of this research was to better understand the relationship that was taking place between these two departments. There seems to be some confusion, some misunderstanding, and some unknown as to whether or not these groups are collaborating or they aren't collaborating. Our research helped point this out. And for those of you that are in this room and that are interested in more research, because we unfortunately only have 30 minutes today to talk about all the findings of the research, and we of course want to hear the panelists' opinions, please stop by the SAS booth, as each person who scans in will be receiving a copy of the research that will be coming out later this year. So allow me now to quickly introduce our panelists. We have Olivier Frank, or Franck, as I should say so correctly. And Olivier is the Senior Director of Sales and Business Development for Edgeline at HPE. We also have Jason Mann. Jason is with SAS Software, and he is the Director of Product Management for Industry Solutions and IoT. And without further ado, allow me to jump into the questions. Gentlemen, welcome to the panel.
Good morning. Thank you.
So the research that we did showed that only about 1/4 of executives see IoT projects as critical as part of their business. Olivia, I'm going to start with you. Talk about whether you agree with this, you disagree, and explain why you choose your answer.
Sure. Thanks first of all, and welcome the audience. I think we do see, I would say, a slow start of IoT project, at least as we are looking into the work we're doing at HPE around industrial IoT, as an example, where we're spending quite a bit of time. I think the reason is that OT and IT find it probably difficult to get immediate results by bringing new technology in. And I think it's, we take it very seriously to try to simplify the additional technology, you know, the sensors, the data acquisition, the analytics, the cloud components, to make business outcomes more real. I think that's one of the reasons probably where your survey shows, you know, this proportion of people kind of disbelieving, if I may say.
Jason, your experience in the market, working with so many companies, providing that user experience
Right.
that allows them to get the most from IoT analytics, are you finding that the stakeholders are struggling to get that executive buy-in and that support required to get the investment beyond maybe a proof of concept and into the market or into their enterprise on a day-to-day basis?
I do. I think one of the challenges that we're facing is that there's varying rates of adoption within many of these companies. And oftentimes the proof of concepts are an island to themselves. So that can generate some questioning around the criticality or the importance. But I have to say, I fundamentally disagree with what I was seeing in return, and perhaps that's an assessment on how well they're doing, but not really an assessment on opportunity that IoT provides. So if you look at the new business opportunities, efficiencies in operations, complete new business models that are out there and available to them, I think as we start to see success happen with some of these early adopters, that you'll see broader adoption rates and an elevation with respect to the importance of the projects.
I have actually an example maybe on that case. You know, we're working with an industrial pump manufacturer. And the choice those guys have is, do I invest into smarter products or do I improve my core product efficiency? You know, pumps is all about efficiencies. And it's true that today this debate is on because it is more difficult to show return on investment if I start adding sensors doing predictive maintenance and going into this whole tough, let's say, mountain to deploy projects at scale and see the return quickly in monetary terms. If I gain 1% of pump efficiency, I see immediately the competitive differentiator versus my competitors. So it's an interesting maybe way to show the dilemma of our customers.
Yeah, the executives as a whole and the companies that I've spoken to have overwhelmingly said, I think there's confusion at the executive level because you hear about data and analytics, and companies want to use data and analytics more, and they want to use it more successfully to predict business outcomes. However, they struggle to realize that IoT, the technology itself, is sort of the catalyst. It's the enabler to get that data and those analytics. So I think some of it too is the rate of change, the speed of change in business, and that leadership has minimal time, seemingly, to get to better understand the technology. And I want to caveat to a question, and this is my second question, but in our research it showed that both IT and OT felt that the risks of failed projects were primarily on the internal resources of the company. Meaning if an IoT project goes bad, the people working in the business will notice. The people working in the factories, in the plants, inside of the agencies will be affected by it. But only a small percentage felt that there was a large impact on the customer. Now let me frame this for you guys a little bit more. So digital transformation is this huge trend, right? And so much of digital transformation has to do with the shift of people and technology and experiences. And companies will invest endlessly in technology when they feel it enhances a customer experience and it's going to be able to, like as you guys just said in your first answer, drive measurable results to the bottom line. Mm-hmm. So as customer becomes more focused in IoT, and as IoT projects become more about customer experience, retail, for instance, is where you're seeing this a lot, will we see that executive buy-in shift when they can say, hey, we're not doing IoT to improve a plant or predictive maintenance or to make sure machines run, even though they do affect the customer. But we're actually doing this because a customer is going to be able to have a measurably better experience because of what the technology is providing. Jason, what do you think about that?
So I think it's two parts to the response. The first part is, many of these early projects, they're about device onboarding. They're about data consolidation, data cleansing. A lot of times that doesn't have a direct customer impact, but it's all requirements for infrastructure that you have to have in place before you move to customer value delivery. So I think there's the consideration and visibility that some of these internal projects aren't directly related. I do think it's going to be critical, though, and where we're seeing success in some of the early projects is where they do have a direct line to demonstrated customer value. those projects, perhaps where you have an SLA in place and you're having to service an end customer, are key with respect to getting funding, getting resources aligned, and ultimately seeing success.
So Olivier, I had the opportunity to visit the IoT Solutions Center and for HPE in Houston, and I'm glad to hear it's back up and running now. The city's been through a lot.
Yeah, indeed.
I saw a lot of examples when I was there of user experience, customer experience, for instance in healthcare, where patient care and where what you guys are doing with Moonshot and Edgeline are being directly placed in enabling a better patient experience, for instance. Talk a little bit about how HPE, or just in the market in general, that you're seeing is shifting from internal focused IoT deployments to customer and user experience focused IoT.
Right, and maybe to give also a bit of a flavor to your question, I think the key question is what will fuel IoT growth, right? Because we understand that it's not, maybe moving at the pace you would expect. And I think today is the 10th anniversary of the iPhone, right? It was opened in 2007. This whole notion of apps was totally stranger to many people at the time, right? Today, there are 2.2 million apps just on the Apple platform, probably as many on the Google platform. I think the correlation is that do we know today what will be the use of that technology tomorrow? I think at this stage, we're still in a kind of putting the building blocks together. And what will fuel IoT growth, I think one key element that we don't talk enough is connectivity. Connectivity like, what we call perpetual connectivity. So we talk about it, but is it true today? When I travel from Lyon to Grenoble, just speaking over the phone on 3G, right? I have dark areas, like, basic voice service is not guaranteed. So when I deploy technology, you mentioned retail for customer engagement, right? Do I have perpetual connectivity? Well, question is where, not always, right? So 5G, I think, will be a key enabler in making this essential element of putting this extra data coming from sensors into reality. And of course, the premise of IoT is changing business models. That's what you're alluding to. Everything as a service, right? We see early adoption, for example, for years we've been mentioning GE engines using real-time connectivity to jet engines in order to do predictive maintenance. But in the real life world, it's not there yet. I think, again, probably it's the aspiration. I know at HPE, you mentioned Moonshot and Edgeline. The first stage of this transformation is us moving our business model to edge as a service. So basically, instead of selling equipment, trying to sell consumption based on the technology, and eventually move to an output-based transaction where we can commit to energy saving, to asset uptime, to maybe customer engagement improvement, top line revenue in stores, right, to the technology. But of course, it's a journey. And we need first all the building blocks to be there. Very shortly, I'll give you an example. Industrial IoT, very large aircraft manufacturer. Today, they deploy technology that I didn't even know, like ISA 111. It's a very low bandwidth protocol that assures perpetual connectivity in the plant. Why? Because Wi-Fi does not guarantee quality of service. You have to share that bandwidth, and if you have too many pool demand, then you lose connectivity. So I'm just saying that the building blocks probably are not all there yet, and we're working to make them present so that we'll be able to move to the next phase.
So Jason, quickly before I jump to the next question, which is a fun one. You guys are coming in, SAS is really just establishing itself as a leader in IoT, especially on the analytics side. And your conversations historically haven't been as driven by the hardware, the data center, as they've been driven more by the analytics and the user and visible. Are you having more conversations, because I get what Olivier is saying, but are you hearing from them that, hey, we need this IoT project to impact our customers? And I guess that's kind of what I want to, in short, can you say yes, are the executives asking for that specifically, or do you still think, even though they're complaining or they're not saying it's critical, they're still not really asking for that customer experience to be a leading part of their projects?
So the answer is yes. We do see a transition to the customer side. You look at, 18 months ago, 2 years ago, there was a lot of discussions around the art of the possible, right? That has now transitioned to what is my return, what is my value to the end customer, and then what is my plan to execute against that. So it's absolutely a change as of recent with those projects.
Yeah, as an analyst, that's what I'm looking for, is that trend, is the shift taking place, because I feel like until the impact is felt in a visible side of the market, right, it's still going to move slowly, because the senior most executives in the companies are generally focused on customer sentiment, satisfaction, and experience. Now, that varies company to company, of course. In a very industrial environments,
exactly right. Yeah.
The operations are the key.
Yeah.
But today, more and more, especially in this digital transformation age, digital transformation is almost always customer-led. You hear that in almost all cases. Who's ultimately consuming the products? And even in the case of a lot of operational, it's still employee-led. It's still talking about the employee experience. So IoT and automation have become a resistance point there too, because you have employees inside who are scared, we could have a whole nother panel on that debate, but I'm going to skip it. I'm going to skip forward right now. I want to talk about a perception thing, because a lot of this research started on a perception. We said, we wonder who thinks they're leading IT and OT. And as it turns out, and just as a breakdown, our breakdown of the research was about 60% IT leaders and 40% OT leaders. So it was a pretty even split, 60-40. But IT said it's us. IT said we're in charge of IoT solutions. And by the way, OT said, no, you're wrong. We're in charge. And there's a problem, because realistically, that's too many people in charge, not enough people on the execution side. Jason, I'll throw this one your way first. But how is this disconnect impacting IoT projects? And what can companies do about this?
So I think first I'll say it's not a recent phenomenon that you have this disconnect between IT and OT. For someone who's been in the software space for 15 years, the pendulum is always transverse from the business to the IT side, and we're seeing that repeat again within this particular realm. And we talked a bit about the two elements that they represent. So there's an infrastructure play. IT is normally the driver of that. We have to put that in place before you can then move forward with the OT side. The OT, they're talking about business efficiencies, what we can deliver to bottom line cost reduction, and then also looking at new opportunities to bend the revenue curve up. And these happen many times in these silos that have started to develop. So I think that will continue to change as the infrastructure play and the infrastructure gets more mature. From the cloud environment, the network, all the way out to the edge. You'll start to see more of these use cases leverage that, and by default, you'll see some convergence between IT and OT representatives there.
So Olivier, HP has seen a huge transition as a company over the last few years, but also as you've gone to the edge, you've started directly engaging much more to OT, whereas historically you were a data center core type of company. You're having conversations, your teams are, from a hardware and services side with both IT and OT. There's no way they're not collaborating. But what are you kind of hearing about this perception, and what are some of your ideas to bring them more together to help these IoT solutions succeed?
Yeah, so it's a very interesting question, and the result of the survey is hardly surprising, in the sense that I think the IT side of the house is probably the underdog those days. At least that's our experience. Again, I'm taking an industrial flavor to the IoT, because again, that's where we mostly focus right now. Fact is that probably 70%, at least that's our perception, of the projects are coming from the OT world, OT driven. However, the IT weight in the decision making, in pushing standards, including security, system management, basic stuff is increasing. So we see that very much. And actually, that's one of the fundamental approach we took as a company is to push IT-OT convergence thanks to technology. So for example, what we're doing on our Edgeline products, we're embedding OT technology on IT platforms. So the same system management tools that IT are familiar with are a conduit to push standards in the factory. But I would say there is a lot of resistance in OT. I mean, an analogy, they do the nuts and bolts and the IT does the bits and bytes, right? So it's in the sense that they work on mission critical production lines. When it stops, it means no shipment, no revenue, right? No invoicing, no revenue. So it's a massive visibility on project. I think that explains maybe why they see the glass a bit more, half empty in terms of they are in control, it's a serious thing, IT stay away. We see a lot of customers where this silo exists, and in a way they even want to keep the projects a bit below radar screen of the IT. Yeah.
But we have to break that silo, right? Because transformation cannot happen in silos, it cannot happen in a vacuum. And I think you guys would both agree with this statement that there is no way for IoT projects to succeed if IT and OT are not working together. Again, every business has its challenges. Part of transformation is a people and leadership thing as much as it is a technology thing. In fact,
yes.
I would argue, and if you've read anything I've written, you'll see I would say it's more.
Change management.
Change management. Digital transformation, I would say it's sort of change, it's the modern terminology for change management.
Yes.
Because technology is so important. But I want to go further because there's even a little bit further of a disconnect, and that's essentially IT seems to feel that the coordination's going better. So although IT believes they are in charge, but so does OT, IT seems to think, in about 60% of cases that the coordination is what they would say very good. And in our research, that was the top. We didn't even ask about excellent because it was 0. Nobody thought it was excellent. But on the other hand, OT, less than half, thought it was good or adequate. So OT is actually saying, we don't think the coordination's going well at all, or at very best, they're saying, it's okay. Why do you think IT would feel it's going better? And Olivier, why don't you jump in first here, but do you have any suspicions as to why IT is saying, this is going well, while OT is going,
Yeah, I think as I alluded to, the project management, the deploying big enterprise systems, there is a lot of trust in the technology, maybe probably more optimistic view on the IT side than the OT side. I think that's one element. As I mentioned, in the OT world, production stops, it's immediate business impact. IT is built into much more high availability, resilience for years, right? So there are many more, let's say, watchdogs. I think there is a little bit this glass half empty, half full. That's probably one of the reasons why the respondents show that way would be my way. But we know, as you said, coordination is absolutely key. I think that's why we take a very strong foothold in pushing standards, OT, IT convergence, maybe software-defined OT, bring the goodness of IT into the OT world. And there is a massive people aspect and training, right? That's obvious, but we'll probably talk about that later.
So Jason, touch on that though. You can take a side, but pick one. From an IT and OT perspective, is OT undervaluing the collaboration? Is IT overestimating it? What are you seeing from one of those sides?
I really can't point to one thinking a level of importance versus the other. What I can say is I think it's just the nature of the market and the speed that these projects are moving. We look across recent projects in retail or smart city or factory and rail. Not one of those have we been presented with the opportunity from a combined effort between OT and IT. It always starts with one side or the other. And then as the project moves through or matures, they bring the other party in. So I think that is viewed oftentimes as a disconnect, but it's just the nature of these projects right now. And in fact, I don't think it's specific to IoT, just the nature of projects in general, where you're going to have a driver out of one business unit on one side, and then they have to bring the others to the board because all of the decisions at the end, especially at enterprise level, are going to require buy-in from both sides.
Yeah, I think we've always had, you've seen statistics, 50% of IT projects fail. That came out in a study a few years ago. Let's be frank, or franc, Olivier.
That was a bit easy, but yeah.
Yeah, that was a layup. But 50% of technology isn't bad. 50% of technology, I'd say 90+% of technology sold, especially by the major players in enterprise, works very, very well. It's been designed to work very well. Projects fail because of people. And so I want to swing the last question. Before I ask the last question, we've got about 10 minutes left. I'm estimating after you guys answer, we'll have 3 or 4 minutes left. And they would love to answer any questions you guys have. So if some questions have come to mind, please think about them, and I'm going to save a couple minutes at the end here. But my last question goes back to this. So this lack of coordination may have been cited as number one, but you guys, and throughout this entire panel, have alluded to leadership, management, that projects are often struggle because of people. And then after coordination, we heard budget as an issue, especially with government. We heard budget as a big issue. We've heard some people said that the technology itself wasn't ready enough, and that's what has caused some of the failures. And the last one, and we also heard frequently, was management support. So here's some new barriers. Olivier, speak a little bit to the leadership side. And Jason, I'm going to want to hear your take on this too. How much is leadership at fault or responsible for making IoT successful in the enterprise?
So how many companies have a digital transformation officer today? I don't know, that would be an interesting survey to do. I think what I observe is when this IT-OT convergence is taken seriously, those senior roles reporting to CEO are put in place. And typically their role is actually to federate all the technology-driven activities across IT and, let's say, OT. Again, we see that today in a number of companies. I think that's a very clear indication about digital transformation and impact on the business. One thing we didn't mention too much, we talk about leadership, that's one dimension, but I think communication, to some extent, internal marketing on early success is extremely important. And that's not specific to IoT, but in terms of innovation, bringing innovation to a company, doing change management. We're working, for example, a different field in the investment banking side, bring remote PC technology to traders. I take away your PC, I give you a remote connection to a server technology somewhere in the cloud. This is huge change, right? I mean, if I can demonstrate that you don't leave any benefits, you're going to do your job even more, better because you can be mobile, you can work from anywhere on the planet. This is important. I think the same analogy goes on some of those key projects. It's leadership, it's also communication and walk the talk in the change management.
Great point. Jason, you want to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Leadership's critical, and it's critical in defining the project. So assign an achievable goal, right, that's within the capabilities of the company, so there's an assessment of maturity, and then there has to be a plan of execution against those achievable goals. I think there's a stat everyone grabs onto. It talks about 40% of compute is going to be at the edge or in these edge devices in 2020, 2025, whatever the date is. IDC, I think, is the author of the report. And so you hear some of the projects, the scope provided around this, but you think of all of the steps that are required to be able to achieve that. So it's a maturing process. There's obviously infrastructure, there's networks, protocol alignment, the ability to distribute insight, analytics assessment to the edge, and some, just the fact is, some aren't ready to achieve that in the short term. So you have to build a foundation and then continue to expand from that. And it's critical for the leaders of these projects to understand first their starting point, clearly articulate the objectives, and then have a plan for execution against that. So absolutely critical.
Yeah, there was a recent statistic that came out in research that somewhere just about 45% of boards and CEOs did not see digital transformation as a board level concern. And we're doing some additional research. We'll actually release a digital transformation index later this year, and we're trying to understand the impact that it has when a CEO or a board does not buy into digital transformation or does not see it as a board level. I mean, IoT, analytics, forget that. I mean, if you don't have it at the top level, but what we've already come to understand through the early responses has been they hire leaders like CIOs and CMOs who also do not prioritize the transformation at that same level. And so what happens is it infiltrates the culture. The whole culture starts to become somewhat resistant to change, innovation, implementation of new technology. But ironically, in our studies, we were trying to identify the 7 key pillars to digital transformation, and technology was one, innovation was one, and the other 5 were all people. People in business and leadership related. And it's really interesting because so many times we come to events like this and you hear digital transformation, and what you hear about is a bunch of technology stacks. And from what you guys have said so profoundly today, so much of the success starts with leadership, people, customer experience, and ideas, coupled with great technologies like what you guys at HPE and SAS Software are doing today. So we have about 3.5 minutes left, and for anybody out there, we'd like to open up an opportunity to ask Olivier or Jason any questions. So anyone brave or interested that wants to step up and ask a question of our panelists right now, speak now. Don't all come up at once.
Silence.
You know the problem, guys, is either you did too good of a job,
Yeah, well, they're all asleep.
or you know the rule is if when you actually leave enough time at the end for questions, you won't have them. But don't you worry, if we had gone all the way to the end, we'd have had 3 or 4 people that are lining up. So let me wrap up really quickly then, since the audience isn't ready to jump in here, and just say, guys, first of all, I really appreciate both you, Jason, and you, Olivier, joining me for this panel. As I mentioned early, for those that came in, question.
She has a question.
We do have a question up in the front.
Is there a mic somewhere?
Thank goodness he's running. I think that clock just skipped a second.
Can you comment on how AR and virtual reality fits into the whole IoT world?
Sure.
You guys take about 30 seconds
first?
each.
Yeah, so maybe I start, if you don't mind. So we're totally part of the way the use case and the deployment of the IoT project works. I give you a concrete example. So we're working, one of the most mature use cases, making data visible to industrial machines, working different protocols. So then, looking at when things do not go well, and eventually predicting the future, so what we call predictive maintenance. Well, we have a use case we call augmented maintenance, whereby once you do detect something goes wrong, you can dispatch a field service engineers equipped with a tablet, eventually with HoloLens or any kind of Google glasses of this kind, and basically get instructed guideline visual, like overlay. We demonstrate that on our booth, by the way, so I invite you to go to the HPE booth, and you see basically instruction-led assistance. So we improve the ability to do the right job the first time, and we allow many more efficient maintenance. So that's one example, but it's totally part of the whole user experience that Daniel was mentioning about. Yeah.
Jason, quickly.
I think we're a little ways from the technical adoption, but I think it can fundamentally, AR, talking directly to that, can fundamentally change our engagement with the asset. So the ability, at point of service, at point of inspection, to have a wealth of information available to you through whether it be Google Glass or your iPad, it's going to change the way our field techs engage with assets as we move forward. And then if you switch over to the VR side, now you start to have the opportunity to do that from afar. So you start to assess, reduce the cost to roll those trucks, for instance, and do your first level or even adjudication of the issue from a central point without all the overhead costs. We're a little ways with respect to adoption of technology, but the opportunity is certainly there.
All right, well, thank you everybody very much for attending today. Please drop by the SAS software booth if you scan your little thing. They will be sure to send you out this research, which will be coming out later in this year. Olivier and HPE, Jason, SAS software, I want to thank everybody very much.
Thank you, Daniel.